All right, man, peace. So for those of you brothers out there who read the scriptures, you'll know that in Luke chapter 12, verse 48, it tells us that to whom much is given, much is required. And like most other things, even the scriptures have a resonance of duality depending on your level of understanding. Because both on the right-hand side, the side of righteousness, and the left-hand side, the side of wickedness, to whom much is given, much is required. If the Most High gives you whatever gifts he happens to give you, you owe it to him to express those gifts and utilize them to their maximum. On the left-hand side, if you're someone who wants to immerse yourself within the understandings of quote-unquote Luciferianism, you are going to have to give to that as well. You're going to have to give of your quote-unquote soul. So from both perspectives, to whom much is given, much is required. And that brings us to Mr. Michael Porter Jr., the young up-and-coming rising star of the Denver Nuggets, who decided that he was going to say something off script. Brothers have to grasp this. Once professional athletes or any other entertainers, and that includes politicians, actors, singers, etc., are able to reach a certain level where they're promoted to the masses of the people as idols, they are not allowed to speak as the masses speak. That's one of the reasons why the mainstream liberal media has such a problem with Donald Trump. Because even though he's a part of the overall storyline, he is controlled opposition. He does speak like a quote-unquote regular person speaks. He wonders out loud like a regular person does. He meanders about things. He hypothesizes about things like a regular person does, and he's not supposed to do that. He's supposed to stay buttoned up and read from his script faithfully. When it comes to Mr. Michael Porter Jr., he made a statement about the coronavirus that the powers that be do not like, and I'm sure will not like in the future, and it might hurt his furtherance in the NBA if he continues on this path. Michael Porter Jr. declared a few days ago that he believes that the government is using the coronavirus to control the masses of the people. Now, brothers, we have to understand that as three-dimensional thinkers, or aspiring three-dimensional thinkers, multiple things can be true all at once. The government can be using a certain story, a certain controlled narrative to manipulate the people. And that thing can also be something of substance. The coronavirus is a real thing. People are actually getting sick and dying. Is there some level of hyperbole when it comes to how these deaths are being reported? No doubt about it in my mind. Multiple things can be true. When someone says that the coronavirus is a hoax, hopefully they don't mean that it doesn't exist. Hopefully they understand that maybe from their perspective, it's something that actually is relevant, is substantive, is valid, it exists, but certain factions put it forth to be utilized to control and socially engineer society. And I believe that that is where Mr. Michael Porter Jr. is coming from. For those of you who don't know, he is a quote-unquote so-called Christian. He is an ardent believer in the church interpretation of the Bible and what it's about. That therefore makes him a globalist, whether he understands that or not. But people who are ardent believers in the scriptures, whether it's rightfully or wrongfully, they do tend to lean towards a search for truth. They do tend to question things. Now, depending on whatever degree the Most High is going to allow them to see, whatever glimmer of light he allows them to see is between them and the Most High. But just getting back to the point, to whom much is given, much is required. They are going to expect Michael Porter Jr. to keep his meanderings, his hypotheses about what's going on in society to himself, unless he's using it to further the agendas of the mainstream liberal sports media and the mainstream liberal media at large. That being to push and promote modern forms of societal manipulation, gearing people towards globalism, feminism, the support of homosexuals and lesbians, transgenders, etc. If he's not willing to do that, and also, of course, the self-victimization as a so-called black man, they need you to want to play the victim as a so-called black man. That's why they love LeBron James so much. He's a king in name only, because even though he presides over a relatively affluent and powerful empire of influence, he himself is on a puppet string. He's being controlled by the Caucasian Democratic Party, because that's what they are. The so-called blacks associated with the Democratic Party are just as bad, if not worse, coons than they allege quote-unquote Republican blacks to be, or apolitical blacks to be. There's nothing worse than a modern-day liberal, democratic, woke Negro. They are by far the worst, because they do not even comprehend how convoluted their thought processes are and how little sense they make, especially when they're evaluated based on how many solutions they brought forth, which are none. Now, Mr. Shannon Sharpe is one of those so-called believers in the quote-unquote democratic mentality or the democratic mindset. So, of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
In a question and answer Snapchat session, the Nuggets' Michael Porter Jr. called the COVID-19 pandemic overblown and said that it was being used to control people.
For the most part, I agree with him. I did not hear the soundbite or read the article, wherever it was that his comments were contained in. But I agree with him. The COVID-19 outbreak has been relatively overblown. Relatively. Meaning they have assigned other forms of a person's demise to COVID-19 just to hype up the numbers. There's no doubt that they want to blame a lot of what's going on Donald Trump. But this is a global live exercise. This is something that is being staged by the quote-unquote deep state or the actual powers that be that rule from behind the curtain.
Coach Mike Malone said that he did not want to be the, quote, thought police and wanted to let his players speak their mind. But the coach also said he wants to educate his players about the potential impact of their words.
What that translates to is that Mike Malone most likely agrees with him, but he understands that being within the NBA is not just about basketball, it's also about politics. They're playing in a bubble tournament that's named after a pseudo-political organization that calls itself Black Lives Matter. There's a reason why they have Black Lives Matter inscribed on their floor, and they're wearing warm-ups that say Black Lives Matter. And it's not because they care about the lives or the plight of so-called black men. It's because they're being employed to do so by Adam Silver, who's working hand in hand with certain Marxist forces, both national and international, including the Democratic Party.
Shannon, what is going on here?
I thought his comments were very disappointing. Skip, I think the biggest thing that we face right now when dealing with this virus is misinformation.
Well, I have to disagree with you there, Mr. Shannon Sharpe. Misinformation is high on the list, but what transcends misinformation is disinformation. For those of you brothers out there who don't know the difference, I'm sure that most of you do, but disinformation is erroneous information that is dispensed on purpose. People are lying to you so that they can throw you off balance, recalibrate your mind to think something that isn't true, and they're doing it on purpose. That's disinformation. Misinformation is information that's given to you that is erroneous and it's by accident. Say someone thinks that they're giving you the appropriate directions and they're leading you astray, and they didn't do it on purpose. That's misinformation. Someone who leads you astray on purpose, that's disinformation. So that is the number one problem right now, is disinformation, not misinformation. And Shannon Sharpe, being the normal presumptuous quote-unquote liberal, likes to speak from atop a mountain that he himself has graven out of the ground to try to act as if he's speaking from a higher level of comprehension. All he is the normal quote-unquote woke black Democrat who doesn't know anything and is just listening to whatever a white liberal tells him. That's all Shannon Sharpe is. So right now, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, is saying everybody must wear a mask because they're trying to think up some reason why there are so many people testing positive in California for COVID-19. Could it possibly be that masks are not effective in stopping the virus from being spread from person to person? That is the only reason why 500,000 plus people could possibly have tested positive for COVID-19. It can't be because they're not wearing masks. As we know, viral particles can pass through a regular mask. That's already been determined. That's why whether it was the WHO or the CDC have stated that the only mask that's really going to help you is an N95 mask. The vast majority of masks that are being worn are cloth fabric, and basically people are trying to make them a fashion accessory. So it's only to help people mentally believe that they don't have a chance of getting sick, which also will aid you because mental security makes your immunity level go up.
I think the thing is that people are putting things out there because they're not taking this serious, Skip. Everybody, when it first came out, everybody said it's just a flu. It's the common cold. But this is what I've known, Skip. I've lived 52 years.
Well, you know what's interesting about that, Mr. Shannon Sharpe? The COVID-19 test will actually register as a positive if you have the common cold. Ain't that something? I have news for you, Shannon Sharpe. There are many people who have come down with COVID-19 and they recovered from it in a few days. There are people who have it right now, and because their immunity level is so high, they're called asymptomatic, quote unquote. The term asymptomatic is just modern newspeak for someone who has an immunity level that's high enough to render the COVID-19 virus as relatively inert. That's all that term means. But they have to throw asymptomatic people in there because they want you to think that when they drop the vaccine, you should get the vaccination as well. So there's no such thing as a COVID-19 positive test affecting everyone the same way. Shannon Sharpe and many other liberals who've been scared into believing that the coronavirus or COVID-19 is the next coming of the bubonic plague, they want you to believe that you're supposed to be as scared as they are.
On a lot of people that had the flu. I've never heard someone say, you know what, Kevin has the flu. Let's go to his house and have a party.
Well, I have news for you, Shannon Sharpe. I've heard of people having the flu and being allowed to have relatives come visit them, bring them soup or medicine or what have you. What the media has done is they've demonized the COVID-19 virus or the coronavirus so much that if there's even an inkling that you have it or that you've been around people who have it, you're supposed to be shunned like you lived in biblical times and had leprosy. So there's so much hyping up of the coronavirus. I've said this before. If coronavirus was a rapper, they'd be getting the best publicity, the best promotion. Like back in the day, the notion was the rappers who are popular because they're getting the most promotion. COVID-19 is getting the greatest promotion of any virus I've ever seen. And this is an ailment, COVID-19, that has a 99.9% recovery rate. But Shannon Sharpe and the other wokeities on TV, they don't want you to know that.
That shows you the lack of seriousness that they're giving this.
Yeah. So supposedly, according to Shannon Sharpe, people are giving COVID-19 a lack of seriousness when 50 million people have been laid off from work. We're seeing altercation after altercation after altercation after confrontation on the internet with people who are trying to force others to capitulate to the dictates of governors who themselves don't understand how COVID-19 is spread. We've even seen people get shot because they were not wearing a mask or because they were being told to wear a mask. But according to Shannon Sharpe, it's not being taken seriously by the American populace at large.
A kid have the chicken pox and say, you know what, Michael has the chicken pox. Let's all go together. Let's get our kids go over there and let's go over to his house.
Well, Shannon Sharpe, I'm not quite sure if you're familiar with the concept of the chicken pox party, but that was a thing back in the day when kids used to get the chicken pox or the measles or the mumps or what have you. You know, before they tried to make it look like you had a death sentence if you had the chicken pox or the measles. You know, back in those days, if more than one kid had it, sometimes parents would bring that child over to the other kid's house and they might play a board game or what have you or watch cartoons together.
What happened? So that tells you the lack of seriousness that they're giving this. Oh, this is what we know.
When you say they, Shannon Sharpe, who are you referring to? Are you talking about people at large? Are you talking about Trump supporters? Are you talking about Republicans? Because we know this about, especially liberal black Democrats. They love to act as if they're hovering above the political sphere or political jargon or political arguments, but everything out of their mouth is about politics.
What you can say is, and people like to do semantics. Well, Shannon, it's not a disease, it's a virus. Call it what you want. This is what I know. 150 people have lost their lives.
I think that you mean 150,000 people. And Shannon Sharpe, you started your statements by saying that the biggest problem that we have with the coronavirus is misinformation. I disagreed and said that it's disinformation. If you can prove to me that 150,000 people in America have died because of COVID-19 or not died with COVID-19, then you would have a point. But this is how the media plays games with the simple-minded. And that's the point that Michael Porter Jr. is trying to make. You could die in a damn car accident. If they're able to verify that you also had COVID-19, they're going to list you as a COVID-19 casualty. So what are the real numbers having to do with the deaths due to the coronavirus? Does Shannon Sharpe know? No, he does not. No one knows. No one. And what I found ironic is that when the death toll in America due to COVID-19 or the alleged death toll passed 100,000, they had a newspaper cover that only had 1,000 names of people who had passed from COVID-19. Why is that? Because those were the names of the people that they were able to ascertain actually died because of the disease and not with the disease.
that are suffering, and there are some families that's lost more than one. And it just reported 150,000
yes.
people have lost their lives, and there are many more families that are suffering, and some families that...
Shannon, I absolutely agree with you. But when you guys decide to play the violin when it's suitable for you, that's when you lose me. Because 500,000 people are going to lose a fetus this year due to abortion. Nobody cares about that because you guys claim it's a choice that a woman can make. You're going to have thousands of people this year lose their lives over heart disease. But you're not out there campaigning against unhealthy diets, smoking, drinking sodas, etc. So when you decide to pick your battles like this is why people tune you out.
More than one through this virus. Skip, it's so, and I think what's that play here, Skip? And I remember telling you this in 20...
Here we go. Shannon Luther King, a.k.a. Shannon Kennedy, a.k.a. Shannon Obama, is going to go into another one of his obnoxious socio-political rants, and Skip Bayless is going to sit there like a little baby and listen to it all.
I say, what has happened, Skip, is that this president has forced you to pick a side.
No, sir. Donald Trump has forced you to pick a side because you're emotionally unstable, like most so-called liberal blacks. So at this point, you liberal blacks look at everything like the Bloods and the Crips. You're either on the side of the blue or you're on the side of the red. That's how you guys break everything down, because you're binary thinkers. You're not nuance-based thinkers. That's why you're inept and unqualified to get on television speaking about things other than football, Shannon Sharp. No disrespect, brother. You're very entertaining when you're talking about sports, but when you get to talking about race, history, or politics, all you show is exactly why our people have the problems that we have. There are too many black males who think like women, and you're one of them.
Straddling the fence, you either here or you there. And see, people now say that...
Someone please tell Shannon Sharp that there are literally millions of people in America who evaluate situations as they come outside of the concept of a quote-unquote political party. He's caught down that woke/democratic rabbit hole and he can't get out. He's in the real sunken place.
This virus is all to hurt President Trump's re-election.
No, sir. The virus is not necessarily meant to hurt Donald Trump's chances at being reelected. The media coverage of the virus is meant to hurt Donald Trump's chances at reelection, which is why you get on TV and talk about the quote-unquote poor job that he's done in trying to nullify the effects of the virus, because you're a part of that agenda, Shannon Sharp. And that's why people become so frustrated, because of the delusion of quote-unquote leftists or liberals per se. At least conservatives let you know where they stand. I always tell you, brothers, as so-called black men, we're not on the totem pole. We're not on the hierarchy of the conservative side. It basically is what it is. On the liberal side, they try to make the so-called black man think that they care about us, and they don't. So that's why I respect the conservative side more. The conservative attitude is, look, we don't really fuck with y'all like that. But if you pick yourselves up by your bootstraps and make enough money, then you'll figure out why we say certain things. We still not gonna like you, but you know what? If you're industrious enough and intrepid enough to go out there and get yours, we'll respect you to a degree. The liberal mentality is, we're gonna walk up behind you and act like we're your friend and stab you in the back when it suits us best.
Nothing you say. And what social media has done, now all of a sudden, Michael Porter Jr., he's an epidemiologist. He's an infectious disease specialist. And what social media have done for...
Right, but is Michael Porter Jr. truly trying to act like an epidemiologist? Or is he just making a comment on what he believes is occurring based on how the virus is being reported and the impact of the virus is being reported?
People, Skip, is letting a lot of unqualified people take a title that they're unqualified to have.
Wow. Ain't that the pot calling the kettle black? Shannon Sharp literally gets on television every day and speaks about topics that he has no cognizance, no idea what the hell he's talking about. Whether it's basketball, boxing, politics, or history. He rambles on, and Skip Bayless allows him to do so like a bad babysitter who's just caretaking for a child where they're looking at the clock waiting for the parents to get home. And this guy has the nerve to get on TV and claim that there are forces of misinformation out there who have been empowered by social media. And when you look at Shannon Sharp's social media, all he does is race monger all day. A person who, I'm sure that in the last 30 years, the vast majority of his consorts, his so-called significant others, have been white women. I'd be willing to bet on that.
And coach, I'm a general manager, I'm this, I'm that. You can say anything. And that's what...
Yeah, just like you on television. You can say anything, Shannon Sharpe. What credentials do you have to speak about anything other than football? This is another reason why people despise quote-unquote liberals. They love to speak about tolerance and forgiveness and freedoms unless you're speaking about things or espousing concepts that they disagree with. Then suddenly they become the greatest advocates of censorship.
Here, and I agree. Coach Malone says, you know what? I'm not the thought police, and I don't want to infringe on someone's free speech.
And good for him for saying that.
He said that.
I love
that. Fact.
That's fact. Mm-hmm. But I would like for Michael Porter to just understand that when you disseminate this, 150,000 people have lost their life.
Well, Shannon Sharpe, look yourself in the mirror. When you get on TV every day and start talking about race and white people and what white people owe you and how white people have to correct the problems of racism, do you grasp that there are millions of white people who had nothing to do with slavery whatsoever, who came to the Americas from Poland and from Italy and from Romania and from Russia and from the Ukraine and from Germany and what have you, and who never owned slaves, but you throw them in with all the other so-called Caucasians who did? So when you start to speak about how others should view the grand scheme of things and the grand scope of things, throw yourself in there as well.
And there are families that are suffering. So while you might think that what you're saying is and some people are contrarians by nature.
Yes, most liberals are.
You remember, Skip, I remember when they growing up and there used to be a guy would stand on the box outside the grocery store. And he says, God is coming back, the wrath of God. You don't want... And nobody would everybody just walking by. And after that while, there's one person who stopped. Then there's another person stop. And so now there might have been 5 or 6 people that heard what he said, and guess what they do? They take that and they go give that to somebody else.
So that's very interesting. Did you hear that, brothers? The scenario that Shannon Sharpe laid out for misinformation was a man standing on the corner speaking about God coming back. It's very clear that Shannon Sharpe has an issue with the Bible. He's just not courageous enough for right now to put it forth on television. But that's at the center of a lot of his thoughts and a lot of his angst and his sense of insecurity about this society. That's why he looks to the so-called white man to be a god for him, an idol, someone to accept him. Because he doesn't believe in the Bible. He tries to act like he does, but he really doesn't. He's one of those he's one of those woketies who tries to front like they accept everything and everybody. But if you really push him hard enough, he'll start talking about where did that Bible come from and where did this come from and that come from, because he has his own idea of where he wants society to go, and he needs the Caucasian man to agree with him. He will never have a ruling class mentality because he has a slave mind. As I stated in the 2-part video that I did on Kyrie Irving, he's a house nigga. He's just a low-level house nigga. He's not a high-level house Negro where he's going to try to betray you right there to a white man or something like that. But he is going to try to upkeep the liberal Caucasians' philosophy about the utopia that they want this world to become, the globalist utopia. But why would you use that as an example of misinformation? Are you saying that the man who was preaching on the corner about God coming back is misinforming the people? Are you saying that based on your understanding or your knowledge of the Bible? Or are you saying that because you don't believe that there's going to be a second coming? Because those are the only 2 options.
We get misinformation out there. So I just wish Michael Porter Jr. would be a little more thoughtful, a little more considerate of the people that have lost their lives and take that in consideration.
Shannon Sharpe, by those standards, we can't speak on anything of importance because people are going to lose their lives about a lot of things. And in order to get to the truth, you're going to have to offend people. You offend people every day with a lot of your rants and your rhetoric, and you don't give a shit. People have to stop asking others to give a shit about topics that they themselves do not give a shit about. Now, Michael Porter Jr. is going to have to use a greater level of discernment and discretion if he wants to continue as an NBA player, because the path that he's treading down is real wokeness. He's asking real questions about real topics in a real way. He's questioning media narratives that are of depth. You understand? He's not trying to self-victimize and just buy into whatever he's being told. And you'll see that once you start to do that as a so-called black man, the liberal Negro will turn against you first. That's why I call them modern day house niggas. That's all they are. But in their mind, they're enlightening you.
I got it. Yet I'm going to be careful here not to condemn Michael Porter Jr. He's still a very young man. Mm-hmm. Just a month ago, he turned 22 years of age. Mm-hmm. He's been hurt a lot in his college and his pro career. He was a 14th overall pick 2 years ago by the Nuggets. He's not been in this spotlight much before. And he does have to learn that people are going to take very seriously what he says, because he represents the Denver Nuggets as a professional basketball player.
Right.
In other words, what Skip Bayless is saying is that you're not just some regular nigga on the internet or on social media who's just saying anything. You're someone of real quote-unquote importance, meaning we've allowed you into this club. We've allowed you behind the curtain for your dress rehearsal. Now, depending on how well you read your script, we'll give you greater understanding as to who the writer of the script is, that being the Baphomet. But if you start to ad-lib too much, we're going to have to kick you out of this play.
He's just not a normal 22-year-old.
He's not a normal 22-year-old.
AKA, they're promoting elitism. You're not a normal 22-year-old. You're better than these average 22-year-olds who are just sitting at home or working regular jobs.
Spouting off on the internet.
Right.
Ding.
So he must speak responsibly as opposed to recklessly. Mm-hmm. He must know what of he speaks. Mm-hmm.
So do either one of you guys know of what you speak when it comes to the coronavirus? Or are you just willing to say whatever Dr. Fauci tells you, the same person who has changed his story multiple times since this past March?
I know we get asked by kids a lot, especially when we take our show on the road, man, I want to be you. How do you get? You got the greatest job in the world.
Right.
Well, we do.
Right.
We do.
Right.
I jump out of bed very early every morning. Mm-hmm. But the night before, if I can speak for both of us, much prep has gone into what we do here.
Absolutely.
And you can argue with our interpretation of the fact.
Right.
But we both speak the fact. You can't argue with the facts that we have researched.
Right.
And that we have basically memorized.
Well, I could say this. I know this for a fact. You guys have been wrong about facts many times, but I'm not going to poo-poo how much research you have to do your show. Because just me doing, real videos, not sports videos, but real videos, I have to research myself many times. But I will say this. If you're someone who's trying to get into sports analysis, you don't have to go to networks anymore. As a matter of fact, a lot of this network analysis is going to die out very soon, especially as most of these networks start to figure out ways to pinch pennies. The real future is podcasting and video logging on the internet, stuff that we're already doing on YouTube or Patreon or wherever. So all you need to have is an opinion, and the more astute your opinion and the more articulate you are, the better the chance that you'll have of being successful in the talking sphere. It's not that difficult. Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless, they try to act as if they're like what they do is fucking rocket science. And beyond that, the topic that you're speaking about right now is the coronavirus. You don't have any facts yourselves. You guys are sports analysts. So don't try to frame what you do within the box of being well researched when you're speaking about something that you know nothing about right now.
We don't have teleprompters, or we've jotted it down on our pages here, and our facts are going to be correct, but we are going
allegedly
to debate our interpretations of the facts.
Correct.
We take the facts to mean what?
Right.
That's what we do on a debate show. Mm-hmm. And that's the hard part of this. It's great, but it's hard. It takes a lot of, what I call elbow grease at night. Mm-hmm. I always tell you, I believe the debates are won at night.
Correct.
And how you research and how you think through the debate.
Correct.
Skip Bayless, with all the time that you had debates with Shannon Sharp about Michael Jordan versus LeBron James, you make so many factual errors about the career of Michael Jordan, not even LeBron James, that for you to sit there and brag about the amount of research that you do, there's no way that I could take you seriously. You still claim that Michael Jordan's last year with the Bulls was his year 34 season when it was his year 35 season. Please just stop.
Okay, so when I read his comments, I wasn't sure what conclusion he was leaping to here, but I don't believe it's a fact that coronavirus was a big lie, a big worldwide lie, perpetrated on the world.
I don't think that is what Michael Porter Jr. is saying. What he's saying is that it's a real illness that has its origins in a nebulous way, meaning they're trying to act as if it just happened. And there are just too many factoids that link the coronavirus to being some mechanism of social engineering and purposeful social engineering. And that's what he's saying.
So that people would be forced to go buy and wear masks and then ultimately be forced to be inoculated with a government-recommended vaccine. Right?
No, sir. It's very clear that is exactly what was intended. At least from an ancillary perspective. From a focus perspective, they want to totally change and recalibrate the global economy. They're trying to find a way to go cashless. So once again, this was a live exercise. They're obviously trying to crash the economy. If they were that concerned about the economy, they already have the numbers. They know that really only about 0.1% of people who contract the coronavirus are going to die from it. So if they truly were that focused on trying to find a cure for this illness or for this disease and wanting to maintain society status quo, they would have made some type of changes or alterations to the business world, to the corporate sphere, to allow people to continue to work without laying off 50 plus million people so far. You can blame Trump for it, but I have to blame the corporate sector because they're in control of their own businesses. There's a reason why so many CEOs stepped down this past February and March. They knew what was coming beforehand. So these guys are stepping outside of their jurisdiction. They're stepping outside of their purview right now, speaking about something that, quite frankly, is above their level of comprehension. Much like their conversations on the Black Lesbians Matter movement, where Skip Bayless sat in his chair and accused the pitcher from that baseball team of claiming that the Black Lesbians Matter movement is Marxist, and Skip was incredulous about that when it states it on their fucking website, and one of their so-called founders, Patrice Cullors, came out and said that she was a Marxist. So you're not doing real research, dude. There's no way that you're going to tell me that you and Shannon Sharp are really researching, unless Shannon Sharp already knows a lot of this shit and just doesn't care because he's Boulay.
Believe it's that.
Right.
I know that's not an opinion that is only his. I know there are a lot of people,
Absolutely.
And to your point, that runaway discounting of coronavirus has gotten us where we are right now.
No, sir. What's gotten us where we are right now is the concerted global attempt to change and alter the global economy. That's why we are where we are right now. Because it's not only America that's getting fucked up by the coronavirus.
Miami Marlins, what were they up to now?
Remember, back in March, they said, if you guys just stay home for 2 weeks, everything will be fine. 2 weeks turned into 2.5 months. Now they're trying to sell people on wearing a mask for 2 weeks, and that'll make the coronavirus go away. So it's very clear what they're trying to get people to accept.
17 positives? Yeah. Okay. Has the death toll been somewhat exaggerated because some of the deaths weren't exactly caused by corona? I don't know. But
yes, you do, Skip Bayless. Yes, you do. You just don't want to say it on TV.
School of thought out there also. So I would just ask him, he seems like a deep thinker. I know he made a comment in the wake of the George Floyd murder. He called it a murder, but he said something about we should also pray for the policemen involved.
He's deeply religious, from a very religious family.
I got it, and I am with that school of thought.
Right.
I co-sign there, but you have to take into account the timing of what you're saying.
Right.
People aren't ready quite to hear that the day after.
Right.
Many times brothers ask me, how come you haven't covered this topic yet or that topic yet? Or at least back in the day when I was on YouTube for the most part. The reason why I would take time before covering certain topics and why I knew I was never going to address the Kobe death on YouTube at least off the bat, was because people in general are so mentally weak and mentally disturbed that they need time to ingest the narrative that's fed to them by the media before they can receive the truth. That's why I took my time delving into the Nipsey Hussle thing as well, because most of these people are just functioning nut jobs.
It's after the murder. You call it a murder, it was a murder.
Right.
Okay, so in the big picture of things, it's a slippery slope because you don't want to muzzle him, as Mike Malone said.
Shannon Sharp does. He just won't say it on TV.
Edit correctly.
Right.
You just have to think through what you're saying.
Correct.
Think about the timing. Think about the repercussions of what you might say, because you have influence. You have impact.
Right.
People...
Brothers, when we sit back and examine history, most of the prominent or great men who lived and were killed, quote unquote, prematurely, were removed because they were willing to say inconvenient things at inconvenient moments. The scriptures tell us that the power of life and death is in the tongue. I believe that that's in Proverbs 18 and 21. So we always have to grasp that when the Most High gives us this power to see the truth, when you say that truth, it's almost like you're casting a spell in righteousness, because words have that level of power. You can cast a spell. All words that come out of your mouth are meant to cast spells. That's why the term that's used for creating a word is to spell it out. Right? So understand the power of words. Understand the power of sentiments. And if you're willing to deal with the repercussions, then that's fine. That's why I state, for Michael Porter Jr., to whom much is given, much is required. If he's going to be truly woke, he's not going to last in the NBA for very long. They're going to find a way to drive him out, because eventually they're going to ask him about things like homosexuality, lesbianism, transgenderism, and he's going to give you his true and honest thoughts. And then he's going to find how disillusioned he was in believing that he could be an NBA player and also be a truth teller. It's not possible. You have to read from the script. The woke script is based in Marxism/liberalism. That's the only way that you can be a prominent entity in the NBA from here on out.
Going to weigh what you're saying much more strongly than they would weigh some guy in Des Moines speaking from his mom's basement, right?
Right.
Okay.
And Skip, and the thing is that, and like I said, whomever you like, and the election come up November 3rd, you vote who you want to vote.
Here this guy goes again with the Trump stuff. It's very difficult for Shannon to grasp that there are a lot of people in America and overall in the world who have thoughts where they're wondering why things are happening, how they're happening, and they're just willing to question things. Brothers, never be scared to question something. So the first thing that a liberal is going to do is to try to make you believe that you're a quote-unquote conspiracy theorist, or that you should be ashamed for asking a real question. Because everything that they do is already pre-scripted, is pre-written for them. Because the goal is to force all peoples and kindreds to hold hand in unity against the energy of the Bible. That's what it's actually about.
I believe is best going to help the country. But what we see...
And that's why when Shannon Sharp gave his little scenario, his little metaphor, he used the metaphor of the man standing on the corner, or the example, I should say, of the man standing on the corner, talking about the second coming of Christ. He put that out there as quote-unquote misinformation.
Is that if something comes out, Russia, it was a hoax. Ukraine was a hoax. Coronavirus is a hoax.
Well, Russia and the Ukraine, those were both hoaxes. And they were found to be hoaxes under the scrutiny of a congressional hearing.
And a lot of them people don't believe, well, I ain't wearing a mask. Well, he doesn't wear a mask and he says it's a hoax. It's a hoax. Now, we don't know if it's true, but I just read that the guy, Herman Cain, he just passed. Now, he went to Tulsa
he did.
With no mask.
I saw him on national...
This is something else that that woke liberals love to do. They love to bring up whenever someone who's not a Democrat gets the coronavirus and passes away, because they try to link it up with that person being a Republican. Now, Shannon Sharp is on TV claiming that Herman Cain contracted the coronavirus due to his attending a Trump rally, when there were literally hundreds of thousands of people over the course of a couple of weeks that were running roughshod throughout coastal or liberal cities, major cities all throughout America, because allegedly they were protesting the George Floyd murder. Nobody said that those people were passing coronavirus or COVID-19 from one person to another. But as soon as the Trump rally came around, all of a sudden that's going to be the epicenter of the coronavirus. That's what I mean when I state that this is very much like the Crips and the Bloods. As soon as one side sees the other side's colors, there's nothing good coming from it. Everything is bad, and everything is the fault of that side. And Shannon Sharpe is stuck. He's stuck in that, that paradigm, and it's very, very sad.
And, it's a hoax, and it's yada yada.
He was sitting right behind.
And it's sad, Skip, that it's come to this.
Yes, it is. It's very sad that it's come to this, because Shannon Sharpe, you're sitting on TV trying to act as if you're impartial or you're an objective observer, and you're not, bro.
Skip, look, I'm not willing to put myself in jeopardy. I'm going to wear the mask. I'm going to do that. I'm going to listen to, I've heard enough of these guys from Emory and Harvard and Dr. Fauci. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna take them at their word.
That's good for you, brother. You make sure that you take them at their word. I just always say the same thing. Keep that same energy. And I have no problem with people who wear a mask, because I wear a mask when I go outside and I have to go to the store or what have you, because that's not the hill that I'm going to die on. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be going back and forth with a clerk or with a police officer because I'm wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. I have too many things that I have to get done every fucking day. But those people who decide that they're going to be so zealous about everyone else wearing a mask that they want to harass them or attack them or blame them for what's going on in society, keep that same energy when the vaccination drops. Keep that same fucking energy. I promise you that the vast majority of these woke niggas are not going to get the vaccination, or they're going to act shocked when their governor tries to make the vaccination mandatory. Because I promise you that had the president been a Democrat, he would have already put out a decree that everyone must wear a mask, and that when the vaccination drops, everyone must be vaccinated. And then all hell would break loose out here. But I have a feeling that a lot of these Democratic politicians and governors, mayors, etc., they're worried because they know that they've taken a step maybe too far in trying to tell people what to do and how to think, and they might find themselves being quote unquote voted out of office soon. Who knows? We'll see.
Be cautious. People, it was the same thing with seatbelts. But I don't need no seatbelts. I got brakes. Because
this is something, and he must be getting this argument from CNN or something. I don't watch CNN, but I'm hearing more and more wokeities trying to compare wearing a mask to wearing a seatbelt. Brothers, wearing a seatbelt became permanent. So when these people say, we only want you to wear a mask for a couple of weeks and the coronavirus will go away, that's a lie. They want to get you to the place where you're wearing a mask permanently. Why would you make a correlation between wearing a seatbelt and wearing a mask unless you want people to start wearing a mask permanently, because now it's a mandate that people must, utilize their seatbelt permanently, right?
Not only do they give you brakes and seatbelts, they give you an airbag now. So come on, people.
You'll also notice many quote-unquote medical experts saying the coronavirus may never go away. What does that really mean? What's that really mean? Either you're going to have to get the vaccination and show proof of vaccination every year, or you're going to have to wear a mask.
Back to what we can have some normalcy. But I believe our normalcy moving forward, Skip, is that we're going to have to enter a building with masks. Mm-hmm.
This is what the expert Shannon Sharpe is stating. Remember, he's against misinformation. He just said on TV that he believes, and I agree with him, that they're going to try to make it the status quo, that you have to enter a building with a quote-unquote mask. So if that's permanent, why is it that the liberals keep telling people to just wear masks for 2 weeks and it'll all be over? Why are you saying that if this is what you really feel?
The time we're not going to have those masks on when we're eating and drinking if we're in a restaurant. Mm-hmm. I believe that's where we're heading. Kind of like what happened after 9/11.
Shannon Sharpe, is that where we're heading? Or is that what you're willing to accept because you're so fearful and you believe everything that CNN tells you? Once again, you're claiming that the biggest issue that we have in society today is misinformation. Once again, no, it is not. It is disinformation. So let the record show Shannon Sharpe already understands where this society is heading. them trying to mandate permanent mask wearing.
The guy tried to get on the plane with a bomb in his shoe. You have to take your shoes off for the most part.
You do.
And you have to go through a screening. But
Once again, this is proof that any stunt that is pulled, as long as they're giving you the pre-canned solution, liberals will fall for it. They will go for it because they're fearful about life.
still fly. So I believe
We can still fly. I mean, Skip, if they make us wear masks in a restaurant, we can still eat. Our mouth can still open, right? Right, Master? You still gonna let me walk out in the street, right, Master?
there's some kind of normalcy. But we just have to let's just go ahead and put the mask on.
Let's just put the mask on, brothers. Master said put the mask on. We be okay. I mean, Master, can I still stand up and look you in the eye?
He said, well, you know, we can get this thing under control. If we just did it for a month, everybody wore a mask.
Dr. Fauci said,
Shannon Sharp, you just said that where we're going is that we're going to have to wear a mask permanently. Now you're saying that if we just wore it for a month, that we wouldn't have to do it anymore. Which one is it?
everybody in this country wore a mask for 2 weeks.
Okay.
We would turn it completely around. Well,
Why is that so hard, Skip?
The reason why Fauci is saying that is because he knows that Donald Trump is not going to mandate it. So that's his way of trying to blame Donald Trump for the proliferation of the quote-unquote virus. Okay? Fauci is very good at playing that game of fake apoliticism. He is as political as anyone. The reason why he's saying if everyone wore a mask for 2 weeks straight, the virus would go away. The reason why he's saying that is because he knows it now puts the onus on Trump to pass an executive order forcing people to wear a mask for 2 weeks. If I was Trump, I would call his bluff on that and say, you know what, let's do it. I'm going to put forth a mandate that for 2 weeks, everybody must wear a mask. And after 2 weeks, you must take it off because Dr. Fauci said the virus will be gone in 2 weeks. If after 2 weeks it has not been taken off, Dr. Fauci is going to be brought up on charges for malpractice.
It's become politicized. I believe, Skip, if this hadn't happened in an election year, I believe people would have worn a mask.
Yeah.
I don't.
But because it's an election,
right.
and
Shannon Sharp, unlike you and other fake black wokeities, these Caucasians from Middle America, they're really about their liberty and their freedoms, man. Like, they're really about that shit. So-called black people, they talk a good game about being free. But most niggas are just good slaves. No disrespect. There are a lot of brothers out there who are very strong-minded and intelligent. But the vast majority of so-called black people, black liberals, nothing but good slaves.
now it's like, okay, I'm not wearing it, I'm here. I'm wearing it, I'm there. And now we're getting nowhere. And it's sad that people are losing it.
What about the millions of people who are apolitical, who decide that they're going to wear a mask or not wear one because of their individual thoughts, Shannon Sharp? Or are you just paying attention to the political so-called storyline on CNN every morning? These niggas, they love watching CNN, these Democratic niggas.
And we're arguing about politics, and this shouldn't be a disease. Doesn't care if you're...
Nigga, please. You love arguing about politics. Politics is one of your favorite topics. You love talking about politics more than you do damn football. Because politics, that's like arguing over wrestling. It's all fucking fictional. So it allows idiots to ramble on and on, depending on how much of it you know, due to how much of it you watch. Arguing about politics is like arguing about wrestling or arguing about a fucking soap opera. It's all the same thing.
Republican or Democrat or an independent.
Yeah. I just want to say to Michael Porter Jr., don't lose your courage to speak your mind and your heart.
Right.
Just do so responsibly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, maybe in his mind, he is doing so responsibly. He just has to understand the consequences and potential repercussions of what he says because, once again, they view him as someone who they have allowed behind the curtain. If he keeps making certain statements that are not on brand for the NBA, meaning wokety or woke comments or remarks, they are going to remove him. They don't mind you speaking out as long as it's super liberal, meaning pro-homosexual, pro-feminism, pro-lesbian, pro-transgender, pro-self-victimizing as a so-called black man. That's okay. But when you start to speak your true mind, that's a major problem.
Good stuff, guys. All right, our LeBron.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see how